Welcome, and thanks for joining me today on Mortgage Manager Playbook, a podcast for sales leaders who want to improve their team's sales performance and originate more loans. I'm Pat Sherlock, your host. Today, I am interviewing on an important topic as part of our Fixing the Broken Sales Model series. The topic today is, what are your core competencies as a lender? And it's a time to outsource. I have my great friend, Joe Camerieri. Joe is head of sales for Maxwell, the private label outsourcing group. And Joe has been in our business for 40 years. He's well known within our industries, and I am thrilled to have him today. Hi, Joe.
Thank you, Pat. Glad to be here.
Well, let's talk about from the get-go that obviously two important functions that every lender has is the origination side and then the back office side. And so determining the core competency does center on recognizing that the core competency of sales and the wonderful world of back office cannot necessarily be the same or be actually even what I would call good. So why don't you talk about, Joe, a little bit on what are some of the factors that a lender should look at when it comes to the realization that the back office part may be and should be outsourced?
Sure. Well, that's a great topic. I mean, Pat, if you just step back and you take a look at the industry, right? There's probably, I think, a little over 4,300 spots where a consumer can get a mortgage today. Then when you funnel that all the way down, okay, probably 78% of those loans all are delivered into the same place. So you got to scratch your head and you got to say, okay, what differentiates me as a lender from the other 4,300 if all our liquidity is the same, okay, and all our, the manufacturing process and the compliance and all those things are the same. What really differentiates me? And that is the sales model, right? That's the how efficient can I access consumers? What's the sales experience for that consumer? How do they feel about my brand? And am I bringing a branded and a culture to that consumer that A, they're used to, B, that they enjoy? Because really, when you look at the back end, and it is something that's a challenge in the industry, when you look at the back end, everything has to be the same. So you got to wonder, is there a better way to execute the fulfillment and the back office cheaper, faster, and quicker, okay, as a means to be able to create a better value proposition and move that into your sales strategy?
Well, you're speaking my topic for sure on the sales side as a differentiator, but as you well know, our industry certainly has invested a lot, somewhat in the technology side. But is it your view that actually that they have done things that are new and unique? It sounds like from what you're saying that really hasn't been the case.
Well, I mean, it really is interesting. If you go back 10 years ago, right? Big craze was point of sale systems,
Right.
POS, right? And what was so ironic around by that is when the POS craze took off was almost exactly when the refi business was starting to dry up a little bit.
Mhm.
So the consumer direct aspect, POSs are great for consumer direct mortgages, and consumer direct mortgages are heavily weighted towards refis, right?
Mhm.
What that morphed into is your distributed retail loan officer now looks at that POS as their technology. So the POS has continued to, even though they've struggled over the last couple of years, there's less providers and things like that. They continue to hang on as being an important piece of technology
Mhm.
because they're being used by loan officers as where their work is done now. However, all of your service providers who are providing these like kind of leading edge technology type of things, the Finicities and the Plaids and the Work Numbers and things like that, all these things that are bolted into that point of S, the adoption of those technologies to change the outcome of the fulfillment is less than 10%. None of them have double digit adoptions, okay, as part of the sales process. So I think there's a lot of great tech. I think not a lot of it's being used. I think then, and if you think about it, that all the great technology that's available in the mortgage that business that's not being adopted would have great impact if it was on the back office, but it's not. So your back office still is 72, 78% labor and getting that loan to the closing table. So if nothing changes in the front end, nothing changes in the back end.
Well, you really raised a great point, and certainly it's something that I see. I think that managers will recognize that even with the speed of technology changes, like for instance, artificial intelligence and all these other things, how many lenders actually can stay really on top of any of that?
Well, I think, yeah, I think the AI thing is fascinating, but it's kind of like pioneers get shot, right? There's so many applications for that. I mean, I spoke to somebody the other day who literally has an AI fueled bot who takes a beautiful application, incredibly conversational, right? But can you imagine from a regulatory perspective, okay, that a piece of technology is doing mission critical roles, compliant roles that need where you need to be licensed, okay? God, I can just imagine what kind of Pandora's box that would be opened up, right? When and from an audit, either at the federal level or at a state level. So I think the kind of the state of the industry, I think the compliance state of the industry, I think some of the bad things that have happened in the past, it's really going to take a long time for those technologies to make an impact. Great, great press releases, okay, great industry insight type of stuff, but the practical application that's going to move the needle in any way is probably quite some time away.
Well, I think that's an important point, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the adoption rates less than 10%. And that's been true for many, many years. And I do think when you look at the total cost of the cost per loan, it is still significantly your labor and personnel costs. So I think lenders have not been certainly happy with the results of technology. But at the same token, and I think this is an important point, is they haven't really, they feel outsourcing is losing control of their customer, or possibly the other issue always comes in with depositories about that they have to lay off staff. So talk about what you see.
But yeah, well, first you need to define outsourcing, right? And I think that's, immediately, and this is not even in the mortgage industry, across all the business section. Okay, when you say outsourcing, two things pop into a leader's head. Number one, it's labor on demand, and number two, it's offshore. And it's fair, and that's fair because your mainstream global outsourcing firms are people on demand and they're all offshore. And there's a labor arbitrage that goes along with that, right? And I think everybody in the mortgage industry understands and knows that with rare exception, okay, that human capacity offshore has limitations as to what that they could do without impacting that customer experience. So that's where everybody goes. But from a Maxwell perspective, we're filling this little niche where nothing is offshore. It's not capacity on demand, okay? It's leveraging and creating scale. And with that, okay, it's all done domestically. It's all done through a single technology platform. And one of the things that Maxwell will bring to a depository or to a new entrant in the business is to be able to step into a scaled model where the fulfillment people are optimized, which I will tell you that doesn't exist in the industry today. And with that comes a variable cost model that allows the back office to be significantly cheaper provided by Maxwell inside of Maxwell's technology mousetrap than anybody really can create on themselves right now. Now, of course, Pat, what do they say? Rising tide floats all boats, right? Sure. So everybody's optimized and things like that when rates are dropping and the phone's ringing off the hook. But in an environment like today, okay, and even when an environment when rates are are booming, okay, an outsourced provider can move quicker and faster in staffing, okay, and provide a variable cost model that, quite frankly, is very, very compelling, okay, than the fixed costs associated with which dragging down the P&Ls of lenders today.
So let's take a deeper dive on that issue because I agree. I see it myself when you have these conversations with lenders about what's the hesitation of why they are not outsourcing because maybe some or stories that they've heard before or they've heard personal experience or they're afraid of losing control. What is it that you actually see as a stumbling block?
Well, I think, the stumbling block right now is old and past thoughts. And what I mean by that is everyone's like, well, where are you located? Well, we're located in Denver, Colorado. Well, you don't know anything about St. Louis, Missouri, or you don't know anything about, Topeka. You don't know anything about my market. But we live in a virtual world right now. So when I'm talking to a commercial bank, talking about our offer where we provide tech and back office people, we have dedicated resources to them, okay? And when they come to us, it is in our best interest when we're building their capacity to build their capacity with the existing employees that service their sales staff today, who live in their communities today. It used to be that we would build that capacity in a single location servicing or two locations in East Coast rock, like an operation center in the West Coast. But now in a virtual world, we're looking for that capacity that the lender has today and onboarding them as Maxwell employees, providing a variable cost versus a fixed cost to our clients, but really have the ability to optimize that employee's capacity by, if they're not busy with that client, they're able to pick up the slack and lean into other clients. And that's where our efficiencies come from. And that's the benefit that clients have. So it's the old thought that says, I'm going to lay off everybody local and I'm going to move my business to a location where they're unfamiliar with my market. That's no longer the case in this virtual world that we live in.
So why is that such a hard concept to grasp? I'm curious. And one of my personal opinions is that the banking historically, the number of people you managed was always kind of a sign of how important your job was. But this type of model obviously is counter to that. Is that lending to some of the issue?
I think it is. I mean, if you think about it, if you're an independent mortgage banker, and Pat, we've seen this because we've been around for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
If you're an independent mortgage banker, there's a significant portion of your company, back office sales and things like that, that transcend employee and then move into family and friends. Okay, the mix of personal and professional life, right? And again, it's that old thought that the larger my head count is, the more successful I am.
Right.
Versus really how large is my margin and my, and the size of my P&L, right? Now, when you take that independent mortgage banker, that leader, and you put them in a depository, it's hard for them to change that mindset. So I think depositories, obviously, an independent mortgage banker is not going to outsource unless they're in a specialty environment, because you're like outsourcing your whole company. So that kind of doesn't make sense. But from a depository perspective, where they're leaning into this strategy that says, mortgage is not really a business, mortgage is a product. If you're a forward-thinking depository that look at mortgage as a product, just like a credit card and a checking account or a home equity loan, okay, outsourcing is actually a better execution. And it's still but it is just a change of mindset, the ability to look at all alternative solutions and another kind of, I guess would say, unconventional way. But that's exactly what this industry needs right now, because doing it the old-fashioned way isn't fiscally healthy. and it'll continue to be a challenge even when rates do drop.
And so when you look at it from the real world of talking to depository, what again is the hesitation besides the topics that you mentioned that they feel you don't know your market and all that other stuff?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a little bit of loss of control. I think it's a combination of, I'm a leader. I used to run a mortgage company here of 150 people,
Right.
and now I'm going to outsource 100 of them. Okay. Even though I'm providing an oversight on that, that still doesn't feel good as it relates to my career growth and my success and all those type of things. And then the other thing which quite frankly is a little bit of a problem when you look at in the depository world, when you look at heads of mortgages, they tend to be people who come from the op side,
Mhm.
okay, not the sales side, because the
Right.
sales side in a depository is a different animal of its own, right? When you look at an independent mortgage and you look at the head of the company of an independent mortgage banker, they always tend to be from the sales side, not the ops side. So it's really about being open-minded, being, stepping back and saying, what is really the success model here? Okay, for the environment that I'm in, not necessarily looking at it from the success model of perhaps their own career. So there's a little bit of that. Now, obviously in the banks, it's heavy lifting around compliance. There's a heavy lifting around risk. And as an outsource provider in this space, we've been pulled through a knothole 10 times over, and we've passed those tests. Okay, almost all of our clients in the end-to-end outsourcing are all depositories. So we do understand that, but it tends to be hard, and it's difficult for people to embrace hard things.
So what are the issues that you see when people do make those decisions to outsource? What is it that is the driving force typically?
It's really about strategy. And Pat, you and I have had this conversation in the past. There's really three reasons why a depository stays in the mortgage business, right? One is, hey, I'm a bank and I need to be able to lend people money, right? So that's one. Number two is it's a defensive strategy, okay, that says, hey, if I'm not giving mortgages, they're going to go to a competitor to get one, and then I put all my accounts, my commercial banking, I put everything at risk when that happens. And the third one is I really want to be in this business. It's strategic to us. It's a customer acquisition strategy. I'm a bank that's fully committed to this product. I will tell you that probably the third, where they're excited about the business and see great growth potential, is the minority out of the other, or out of all three. So when you want to consider mortgages, you say, hey, listen, if I'm in it because I have to be, or I'm in it because I want to keep my customer in the fold, okay, that internally, that is not a narrative where a board of directors or a senior leadership team says, we need to continue to pump money into this product because it's not strategic to the growth of the depository. Therein lies the magic of stepping into an outsource environment with somebody like us, because we are putting money into that, right? We are keeping up with the Joneses. We are bringing new technologies to our clients. So I will tell you that depositories and banks have fallen. Bucket number one and bucket number two will experience, a significant upgrade in technology, not only to their salespeople, but to the customer-facing technology, a significant upgrade to the P&L, okay, without losing that local look and feel, because we will look to them first, okay, to build the back office capacity. So there will be familiarity not only in the market, but with actually, the people and some of the names that do business, that's in their shop today. So it's really that passive lender, which we're finding more and more in commercial banks and community banks, that would really, really benefit from the investments and the mousetrap that somebody like Maxwell continues to invest in would really benefit from that, from significantly upgrading their offer.
So is there a magic like loan to deposit ratio that even if you say mortgage is important to you, but the reality is you're not doing a lot of mortgages. Is there a magic number that you see that it does make sense? So, well, okay, you're not significantly committed to mortgage.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, unless you're flowing through, and it's not just math, Pat. Okay,
Mhm.
unless you're flowing through, north of 150 to 175 loans a month, it's really, really hard to keep your back office efficient and optimized. With full pipelines, the industry loves to talk about drivers. Like, how many loans does your underwriters do? How big your pipeline is, does a processor carry? How many closers are, so unless you're flowing through 150 to 175 loans a month, it's really almost impossible to keep an optimized back office and fulfillment. So I think anybody underneath that type of volume
Right.
would see a substantial upgrade in not only the investments that we've made compared to what they would have made over time,
Mhm.
but the economics of the product, because they would be stepping in a fully optimized environment.
I'm curious, ballpark, the types of investments that your company is making a year. I'm just curious what that looks like.
So, for example, Maxwell offers its own proprietary point of sale system. We've just released and transitioning our 400 clients today into what we refer to as, internally at least, as a next gen, which is a point of sale system that the client actually can create unique flows for not only their consumers, but for their sales staffs. It's highly configurable. Back to the point that we made in the beginning of the podcast, Pat, this is what I want to do to differentiate my offer into my experience that I'm creating for my sales staff and from my consumer. We continue to invest in integrations from an LOS perspective. So as innovation comes to the market, new third parties, okay, see more seamless connections as the agencies start to change things, like making decisions around getting into the fixed seconds. These are all require and compliant. These all require investments in the back office and the LOS that if you're going at it alone, you're bearing the cost of that alone. Okay. All of that is borne by the outsource provider. None of that is borne by the client. So there's really some there's not only are there like upgrades to the process, but there's significant capital cost efficiencies and cost containment that takes place when you're leveraging a third party who's doing that work for you, because that's all part of the service that they're providing, and keeping up with not only the demands of the industry, but demands of the regulators, demands of the agencies, and the investor community.
So from the start to finish of onboarding, how long is that typically when someone makes the decision to outsource their product or their business? How long does that usually take? And I'm curious about, do people typically do the product first versus the business?
What do you mean the product for? You mean like a single mortgage product or?
Right. In other words, yes, versus all of mortgages going to be outsourced, or is it just the product, like home equity loans, as an example, being outsourced? What are people actually doing?
We've talked about this before, Pat. You can't be a little pregnant in the mortgage business, right? And the regulators are pretty passionate about in the mortgage space, there is a single system of record. Okay. And the reason why they are, and I don't blame them, okay, is there's a lot of reporting. There's HMDA reporting, there's fair lending report. There's a lot of reporting that comes out, right? From that are, LARs and all those type of things from a competitor. It's very, very difficult to pull data from multiple systems and getting that all organized and aligning compliance triggers and decisioning and things like that. So you do have to pull the trigger. Now, if a depository is doing HELOCs at fixed seconds in their mortgage group, that all happens at once, right? If they're not, but they desire to do that, then there's a two-phase. You get the first mortgage business up and running, and then you layer the HELOC and the fixed seconds as a fast follower. But, unless the client has some very, very, if the client has all the stakeholders, or if a prospect has all the stakeholders on board, which is what I mean by stakeholders is, I got sign off now from the business, from compliance, from risk, from finance. If all those people on board and they're committed to the project, it should take any more than 90 to 120 days in order for that first loan to be running through the platform.
And so, again, just to tie back to that, then it appears to be, is it, would you say like it's either 50% the whole business gets outsourced, or maybe people start out with a home equity line product. In other words, something that they're not, in essence, really supporting as well as they had maybe when the market was different. I mean, what is it normally that you were seeing?
So I think it goes both ways. Okay. I think if they're worried about their first mortgage business, but they're intrigued about outsourcing, they'll take a product that they're less passionate about or have less investment in, like a fixed second, like a HELOC, which tends to have, quite frankly, it's less work that's being outsourced because it's more consumer oriented than the length of time that a first mortgage kind of has to weave through the system. So that's a way to step in and try this outsourcing thing out, right? So that would be one way to approach the business. Another way to approach the business, as we said earlier, is let me outsource all the heavy lift. And the heavy lift is primarily focused around the first mortgage business. And then bring over my HELOC and fixed seconds in order to create some velocity in this platform that I've created, right? And now, because I think what we found for the first time, Pat, maybe in a long time, in the last two years, and you know this because we've talked about this in the past, there was so much capacity in the industry and so little loans in the industry. For the first time, distributed retail loan officers, even independent mortgage banking, started to originate second lien mortgages. That used to be exclusively going through online or call center and depository, but because people's equity has significantly risen and consumer debt has risen, and so has home improvement has risen, but the first mortgage business has significantly dropped off because of rates. That product itself has been moved into the hands of producers, in the hands of of retail loan officers, in depositories, as well as independent mortgage banking. So we never had that dynamic in the past from an outsourcing perspective, but they're just the product, right? And a product can be serviced through a consumer lending platform just as well as it could be through a mortgage platform.
So, Joe, my last question, what are some of the trends that you see in outsourcing? If you had to make the forecast for the next few years, what are some of your thoughts?
I think there's two thoughts, around that. I think domestic outsourcing, much like we talked about the capabilities of Maxwell, where there's tech and there's fulfillment, and all focus and innovation and investment is really around the sales process, your salespeople, the consumer experience, and all the things that don't differentiate you, like back office fulfillments and compliance and risk management and capital markets. I think there continues to be a trend, like we're seeing our pipeline here at Maxwell grow and grow with small to mid-size, at least with small to mid-sized depositories. So that's number one. Number two is, what's so unbelievable about the mortgage business is, there's still a lot of innovators out there. And a lot of people say, well, you know what, if you got guts, there's always a hero that runs into that burning building. So we have a number of people who want to enter the mortgage business, interestingly enough. And the best way to do that is not build it one brick at a time. It's to put together that innovative sales mousetrap, and being able to act effectively and efficiently access a consumer base and outsource the back office to help you get started. But I will tell you, though, that the traditional model that people think of outsource, which is that capacity on demand offshore, over the next 4 or 5 years, it's hard for me to believe that everything that you outsource today offshore will not be being performed by bots and AI and robotics.
Mhm.
Okay. That work 24/7, incredibly efficient. Okay. So I see the offshore outsourcing in the mortgage space getting less and less over the next 5 years. I see investments in consumer facing interaction and salespeople getting more over the next 5 years. And I think a common platform for manufacturing loans, okay, like Maxwell does, following suit with increasing in market share, because it's not something that differentiates you. It really just supports the differentiation and the creativity you put into your sales and your consumer facing activities.
Well, I think you're right on, and I'm hoping that that's the case because the investment in the sales, the front side, certainly needs to be made. And I certainly see that myself on a daily basis that we need to develop the sales force to be able to compete today. So I think you're exactly right on. Joe, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom. How can they get a hold of you if they have any questions about what you were talking about?
Well, you can call my cell, which is 609
Mhm.
206 6865, or reach me on my email, which is joe.camerieri, Cam as in Mary, Erieri, and that's at highmaxwell.com. So I appreciate the opportunity, Pat. It was great. It's always great talking to you about the business. I love doing that. So I enjoyed the time we spent together.
Well, Joe, also, I want people to connect with you through LinkedIn because I know you're active on LinkedIn. And I want to remind people to listen to more of our executive podcasts. You can go to patsherlock.com. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks
for listening to Mortgage Manager Playbook. You can catch up on all our episodes by subscribing to receive each week a new show. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and team members. If you're looking to increase production, call me to discuss my prospecting sales training program, Ramping Up Realtor Referral Sources. Check out my website, www.patsherlock.com.